Coming up on More Than Before.
He looked at me with a love in his eyes that I still see to this day that just inspired me. And I said, there's something here that I have to know more about. This is something I want. I'm the kind of guy who I'm either all in or I'm all out. If I'm going to say yes, I think about it.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode. I'm excited for our guest today. He was a colonel in the United States Air Force with multiple command level leadership and environmental awards. He was recognized by Maxwell Leadership by their Culture Awards for nurturing transformation. He is a transition coach, helping veterans find careers that energize them and also help them with their lives to fulfill their lives. He is an avid bird watcher with his wife for over 41 years. They've been together. He is a beekeeper, which is really fascinating to me. He is a father of three, a grandfather of four, but most importantly, what I love about him is his heart to serve others. Don Gleason, thank you so much for coming to the program. Thank you for your service to our country. How are you doing today?
Hey, Nathan, I just want to say thank you for letting me be here today and inviting me to be your guest. And I am doing fantastic. I do want to emphasize, though, I'm not just serving veterans. I'm now transition, right, into serving non-military as well, because we're all going through career transitions at this point, and I think it's so important that we all find that right job and the right life. Appreciate letting me be here today.
Well, I love what you say about the transition piece because you're right. So many people, especially today, are focused on what's that next thing, and they're not quite sure how to transition to the next thing that's in their life. So I love that you talk about that's your focus. Not just you started kind of in the military space, but now you're branching out to more of the civilian population, which I think needs that. So I want to dive straight into your story. I love the fact, so you live in San Antonio, Texas right now, born in Michigan, grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm curious, who was Don as a kid? Like, were you the troublemaker? I mean, most young siblings I know of. I was the youngest of the siblings, so I was trouble. I recognize trouble when they're across from me. Uh, what kind of childhood did you have? Like, what kind of child were you?
I was the compliant child.
Ooh, you were the good child.
I was. I watched my second brother do certain things, and I said, note to self, don't do that. At least don't get caught doing that, right? And so I was very careful. I was pretty much a stay-at-home kid until through seventh grade. Then a bunch of my friends invited me to play YMCA football in the eighth grade, and that led to YMCA basketball in the eighth grade. And I had been watching my older brother. He was really good at sports. He was a wide receiver on the football team for our high school. He was track, ran hurdles. It was always the city, right on the city cusp of the city championship, and always wanted to kind of be like him. So I was big into sports, and he was good at studies. I was good at studies, but my middle brother was the rebellious one. So I learned right away not to do certain things. And my but and as I got into my junior and senior year, my parents, I guess, pretty much trusted me because they they started the empty nesting fairly early, and all of a sudden one morning we woke up and my mom said, "I'm not driving you to school any morning. There's the bus." Okay.
That's
Now
so
she still did
funny.
pick me up a couple nights a week after football practice, which would be 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then after track and after wrestling practice and stuff like that. So she was there for those things. But other than that, they were trying to have their own life. So
So you were definitely you're not the typical. It's funny because I talk to a lot of people that have played some kind of sports. I think most people have played a sport when they were growing up, but most people they have a sport and they stick with that sport and they never try any other sports. So
mm,
the fact that you talk about football, basketball, wrestling, like you actually have a
track.
pretty eclectic track. Like you have an
Mhm.
eclectic background when it comes to sports. And I also know that your father actually kind of raised you in the outdoors too. He
Mhm.
took you out into a lot in the outdoors, hunting, fishing was your father's favorite thing.
Yep.
Like what was that bond like with your father? Like I'm curious because I find that a lot of young men today don't have a really strong bond with their father, and
Mm.
it's from what I've heard, you and your father, like you gleaned a lot from him growing up.
I did. um, I'll say it this way: the last weekend before I joined the service, the summer of 1982, he and I went over to Lake Michigan, and we spent about 3 or 4 days. And and as we were fishing, we would sit and talk about the military, talk about his life. There was one day where it was too windy to go out on Lake Michigan. When it gets over 6 foot waves, it's like, no, not on a 20-foot boat, right?
Yeah.
So it was just too dangerous. So we sat in the room, and he loved to drink brandy, and I would drink a few, and we got talking, and he talked about his time in Korea and stuff like that. In fact, there he is, right over is that my right shoulder? Um, you have to wonder when you're on the screen, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there is his picture when he joined the U.S. Army engineers in Korea, and so I picked up a lot of that. Now, I had no intention to join the U.S. military, none. I watched both of my brothers enlist in the service. My dad was enlisted, and I said, that's not the life for me.
Mm.
But in 1982, when I graduated college, and I had 454 rejection letters from companies saying they weren't hiring. I mean, it was more than knee high in the corner. It was almost thigh high, and I'm 6'5". So that's a tall, darn stack of letters,
That's
and
a lot of rejection.
it's a lot of rejection. But it didn't really bother me. I guess I knew the times were tough. There was a lot of companies my senior year of college who would sign up to interview, and they would come and interview people just to keep their place in line. But it was obvious in the first 5 minutes of the interview they were not going to hire anybody.
Mm.
So it was just about practice. And so that summer, it led into me thinking, do I want to go back and get a master's degree? No. I was done with school. I wanted to get out in the real world. And the only real option I had was the Air Force. And they
Mm.
took me down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and we saw all the research and development, and we saw the museum of all these aircraft, ever since, well, even back in the Army Air Corps days, right? Since the beginning of flight with the Wright brothers that were there in Dayton, Ohio, right? What a great place. So, and then they took me to Chanute Air Force Base, and I said, you know what? Let's do this. So it was on my anniversary, about my 6 month anniversary of being married. I left for 3 months to go to San Antonio. So, so that was kind of me as a kid. I did not want to join the military, but I did not want to go back to school, and I was pretty compliant. I was good studies. I
Yeah.
just missed honor roll. So,
You
but
know,
I was way too quiet. That was the problem. Way too quiet. Go ahead.
well, I think what's interesting is when you talk about the rejection letters, over
Mhm.
450 rejection letters. And I almost feel like there's a correlation here when I talk with someone who has had some kind of athletic background, or maybe even a background in like performing, where you're having to go for a specific part and there's a lot of rejection involved. And so
Mhm.
I'm curious for yourself, how did sports actually develop your character as a person? Because I know that you played in high school football,
Mhm.
and you actually played in college too. You
Mhm.
played for your freshman year for the Badgers.
Badgers, yeah.
We won't talk about that. No.
No.
but I find that an athlete, because there's so much working of character, like if you want to improve as an athlete, you have to be willing to take correction. You have to be willing to go back in and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. How have sports helped to shape kind of who you are today, even like prior to going into the military?
Take a step back even farther than that, right? Being the compliant child, seeing things happening around me, when my dad would say something, I would usually adjust. So when the coach came to me, whether it was wrestling, track, basketball, football, and he made a recommendation, it was almost like my dad in that relationship just saying, "Hey Don, if you want to get better, you need to do this."
Mm.
So I was always listening. I didn't have an ego. I don't know that my dad beat ego out of me, but he set a tone. He had his PhD. Now he went to Korea. He grew up on a farm. graduated 8th grade. I think it's a high, maybe got 10th grade. Joined the army when he was 16. Went to Korea, came back, went all the way up and got his doctorate. But he would never let anybody use that doctorate title unless it
Mm,
was for professional purposes. So when my wife and I were writing up the marriage announcement, he would not let us put doctor. It's not a professional use. So
mm,
he instilled that piece in me of being humble, listening. When we were out fishing, it might have been that same weekend, we had stopped at a small little motel. As we were checking in, my dad was really tired from driving, and the gal behind the desk, it's like she wanted to talk. And I sat there and I was engaged with her and I was listening. And my dad said, "Look, I'm taking the key. I'm going to go to the room. You come in when you're ready." And so okay. So I got back to the room and he says, "You are a really good listener." She
mm.
really needed somebody. You could tell that, and I just wasn't in the mood. So good on you. So he complimented me in those ways of being adaptive, being resilient, being a good listener. You know, um, so I think that really helped me when I went into sports, and it's helped me through my career. Whenever the colonel or whoever would come to me in the military and say, "Hey Don, this needs fixing," right? How you're projecting yourself, how you're communicating, whatever it might be, they gave me a suggestion. I
Mm,
just took it for what it was. I
mm.
didn't take it as, they're trying to get ahead of me, they're trying to put me down, anything like that. It was all about trying to build me up. So I took it very well.
Well, I think that speaks to the quality of your leadership. Like to look at your career, like you have an extensive military career, 27 years of service, which by the way, thank you for that. Commanding three squadrons, leading projects like the 12.8 billion dollar Iraq reconstruction
Instruction.
program. Like I'm curious, like when it comes to that position, I think you're right, actually. Like when it comes to getting those types of higher level positions, a lot of people want to use that to kind of push their way around to get what it is that they want. In fact, I recall you actually talking about this in an interview of, you were actually interviewing to be a squadron leader, and they kept asking you the same question over and over in different interviews. Can you be mean? And I love that question comes up, because the way that you responded to that really shows the type of leader you are, or the type of leader you are, the quality of leader that you are. And I'd love for you to unpackage that a little bit, of what you said. Because so many people today, when they think about leadership, they think about dogmatic leadership, top down, pushing people around. You do what I say. You came at this at a very different perspective, a very different way. And I love the outcome of the story, because I think it almost shows even more so the type of character that you're willing to stand for. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience because this was a time when we actually got to interview for positions in the military. Because when I got to colonel, they took that away. So when I was uh, interviewing for a mission support group or a colonel position, I just had to submit my name to the command. The command sent it to the bases, and they picked it for me. Right. So back when I was a major and lieutenant colonel, is what you're talking about. I was competing for a chief of ops and then the squadron command. And all of a sudden, I got a call one day, and he said, "Hey, I got your resume for this position. You sent it up here. I would love to have a conversation with you. You got a few minutes?" I said, "Well, sure. Yes, sir. I mean, what are you going to say, right?" "No,
Yeah.
sir. I got. It's going to be
I'm
three
busy
hours.
right
No,
now. Call
yeah, I'm
back
busy,
later,
sir.
right?
That's right.
Yeah, that works
Call me
really
next
well.
week." Yeah. So yes, sir. And he goes. So we started talking through the whole thing, and then he stops. He goes, "I got one question for you." And I don't remember if he said, "Based upon what I know about you, based upon what other people have said about you." I don't remember how he phrased it, but he said, "Can you be mean?" And that really kind of took me back. It's not the interview question that I was expecting. Because up till that point in civil engineering, we typically had about 40 to 60% civilians, and you only had about 10 or 11 officers. And I learned early on that you lead by inspiring, right? It's not about directing, even though we talk all the time about military being directive. And there is a time in the military for being directive, right? You're in an emergency situation, you're in combat, you bet. But when you're at home station, it's about convincing people that this is the right thing to do to move forward. So it was not a main tool in my toolbox. It was a tool in my toolbox, but not a main tool in my toolbox. So I had to go home that night. And I did say yes, and that's probably where I left it that first day. And I didn't get that job. And about a week later, I did another interview, and the same question popped up. Can you be mean? And I had decided that this is the way I was going to answer it. Yes, sir, I can be mean. It's not a main tool in my toolbox, but I have used it. If you would like some examples of how I have used it, I'm more than willing to give you those examples. But I would much rather talk about how I inspire people to convince them that this is the right way to go. And they joined my team and we worked together. Again, I didn't get the job. I think it was almost like they were looking for somebody who would
To
just
be
be
mean.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was probably good. It's kind of like what we talk about in the Maxwell leadership, right? If a client says no, sometimes it's no, not now. And sometimes it's no, you're just not the right client for me or not the right trainer for me. That's
Yeah.
great. I'd just like to know. So so yeah, it fit into my thinking perspective of how I want to lead, and that's part of my character, right? I want to serve. Serving is a big part of my values, but it's also being authentic and being integral.
Mm.
Integral, I guess, is the right way to say it. Integrity. My dad
Yeah.
instilled that early on in my life.
Well, I really love that, and the fact that you're willing to stand for something. It's funny because when you when you were talking about, you want to inspire people. I was thinking back and reminded of the story of the commander who, uh, you know, i- one of his subordinates came up and said, "Well, why? I don't understand. Like you normally wear a white shirt, but whenever we go into battle, you ask for your red shirt. Why do you ask for your red shirt?" And says, "Well, I don't want the men to see me wounded, so I wear my red shirt so they can't tell if I've been shot or wounded." There's this one point where they're out on the battlefield, and they're not doing so well, and he looks over at the subordinate man who was talking to him. He said, "Go bring me my brown pants," and it kind of reminded me, not obviously not in the same vein, but there
Yeah.
there is something about this as a leadership quality where you have to lead. You have to go somewhere first before you can take other people there. And one of the things that I really love about your story is the fact that you really do embody this piece of not being so boisterous to push your way around with all the like you have some pretty amazing accolades behind you that you could easily go and allow that go to your head. What, like, even what you were saying earlier, like your father taught you to be humble. And so I'm curious from your perspective as not only a father but a grandfather now. I'm curious, what are some of those characteristics that you would love to see embodied from your kids, from your grandkids? Because you get to see it from the other side, where you get to say, well, you know what? I really hope that I instilled these values, and I want to continue to instill these values. What are some of those core values that you would love to see your kids and your grandkids continue to live out even past your years?
Yeah, I want him to think of that quote that John and others often use, which is right. I think it was it being humble is not thinking less of ourselves, but thinking of ourselves less. So it's easy as we think about ego. When you want to be on the football field. Just use football. You want to win. You want to be the best. You're going head. I was an offensive tackle. I was facing that defensive tackle. At one time, I went against Melvin. He was from our crosstown rival, and he ended up being all state. And we rushed for over 150 yards that night, many of them right over top of him. Because myself and my end on the right next to me, when we cornered him a lot. So we did very well. We beat him, and thus we beat the team. So there's a lot of pride and feeling about that. But it wasn't about coming back later, getting in the guy's face, we kicked your butt, we did this, we did that. No, it was it's like today on the field being able to recognize when you go head to head and you do your best in the competition and then it stops,
Mm.
and then you reach your hand out and you pick the other person up, right? You help them up. If they're injured, you get some attention to them. You can separate the difference between where's the competition and what's life. And I think so many people today can't make that separation. And so I guess that's where I'd want to teach my kids is to respect people and love people. Certainly in competition, you're going to go at them. You're going to do the best within the rules. My second son likes to say, if you if you cheat, you're not trying. If you get caught, you're not trying hard enough. So so we did teach him in our Awana youth program at church to look at what the rules say, but look at what the rules don't say.
Yeah.
And don't bind yourself by what it doesn't say. So we would meet the intent, but sometimes we would change things around to get the advantage. So, but within the rules. So I think they just got to understand how that plays out and how character plays out. When you're a whiner and you're a cheater, people don't respect you. You may get the short term respect because you win, but you're not going to get the long term respect because nobody wants to be on your team.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious. So you have this stellar military career, and then you retire. What happens after retirement? Because there's this period that all of a sudden you start to take on kind of a challenge. Like I would almost say like an epidemic going on in the United States, right? You have a lot of service members who are coming back from active duty, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and so then you have this horrible statistic. It was a couple it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I remember, where it was that it was the 22 challenge, right? It
Hmm.
was 22 push-ups every single day, because 22 service members who were retired were ending their lives. And I was actually looking up the statistics recently, from, I think it was 2021, the statistics that they have out right now, but on average it's 16.8 people every single day within the military are ending their lives from the and this is based off of the National Veteran Suicide Prevention Report. um,
Hmm.
you know One is way too high of a number, period.
Hmm. Yep.
And I know that this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart, but I'm curious, why did this come top of mind for you? Why did you start wanting to
Ah.
fill this gap in this void in our culture?
I'm sitting here laughing because this is such an interesting journey. um, I retired from the military in 2009. Got in with Booz Allen Hamilton worked as a management consultant for 9 years. Did a number of things we may talk about, but it was one heck of an experience. And left that experience in 2018. But I got certified on the Maxwell team in 2015 and formed my own company in 17. I used to, when I was traveling with the military, when I was flying on jets to different places, large jets, pull up the American Way magazine or the Delta magazine. I would look at some of these entrepreneurs and things they were doing, and I would dream about being an entrepreneur, right? Owning my own company, doing different things. So now here was my opportunity, and this was starting to come to reality. As I started down this path, I remember I think it might have even been before had left Booz Allen. I was at the International Maxwell certification in Florida in October, and it was warm outside. And used to have about a 2-hour break in the afternoon. And I grabbed my swimsuit and I went outside and I took a notebook, a little pad of paper with, and I got a beer. I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not leaving this seat until I figure out who my target audience is for Maxwell. And I wanted to serve the architect, engineer, construction community that I had come from.
Mm,
But I kept feeling this pressure internal toward military, toward military and transition, toward the stress that you're talking about. And there are some other estimates out there that it's much higher than 17 or 22. Somebody
yeah.
in a podcast episode that came out on the 26th of November, they cited 44 a day.
Wow.
It's like so we don't really know exactly what the number is, but like you said, one is too many. But I left that seat that afternoon and said, I'm going to work on the architect, engineer, construction company because that's what I can monetize. That's where I can make money. That's what I think I can make a big impact. And guess what? It didn't work. Lots of reasons we could go into, but didn't work, just didn't resonate. But I kept getting pulled back to working with military.
Mm,
And all I can say is it was God blessed, God inspired. Because as soon as, like just as COVID hit in March of 2020, we started a nonprofit totally focused in on using the mastermind concept to help military in transition, help the team of 8 to 10 people for an hour, getting together and sharing information and helping each other. It took off. We helped over 157 people in 3 years. The fruit of that effort was clearly an indication of where that inspiration came from.
mm,
So I think back to being a commander, being a supervisor in the military, and saw people struggling, and I just see them struggling today. And I bleed blue. I bleed blue for the Air Force, right? Um, I, I'm Air Force hook, line, and sinker. The core values, integrity, service before self, excellence, and all we do are still my core values. They fit with me so good. I wouldn't have stayed 27 years if they didn't. So how can I help those people getting out of the service who are frustrated, who don't know which way to turn? Sometimes there's too many options today.
yeah.
That's a problem because here I am starting a new program, and there's already thousands and thousands of programs out there, but I see so many programs misleading or not leading them in the right direction. And we can touch on what the big pieces are that I see, but I want to get in and help them to have the same life I had, the same smooth transition to a good job. I stayed 9 years with Booz Allen. On average, according to a study from Syracuse University Institute for Veterans and Military Families back in about 2015, and they've updated it and it's still about the same, 45% of military leave their first post-military job within 12 months at the
Mm,
rate of 45%.
wow.
So almost one out of every two are changing jobs in that first year. 65% within 2 years, 2/3. I stayed for 9 years. What was the difference? I'm constantly thinking about that. What was the difference? And uh, and I think for the big part of it is they don't know what they want to do.
Mm.
They
I
haven't.
think it's
They're almost afraid. I was just writing up a lead magnet earlier today, and I was writing in the piece of if it's like marketing, right? If you try to market to everybody, you're really marketing to nobody. If you want
mhm,
to be anything, then nobody's going to pick you up because they don't know what you stand for.
yeah.
So how do we get people to zero in and not try to be the jack of all trades? In the military, we got promoted by being the jack of all trades, but civilian companies want the technician, the specific individual working for a specific job. That's what they're hiring you for. And if you don't communicate that way, it's not going to work.
Well, and I think you're on to something here with, because so many people, they need purpose. I think if you don't have a purpose for why you're living, why you're waking up every single morning,
It's a great
life
word.
gets really difficult without purpose. And one of the things I also find though is many people try to jump the gun and they go straight to purpose and significance. They go from purpose, uh, they they immediately want to go to purpose and significance. But the problem with that is most people don't even know who they are,
Mhm.
especially within the military. I mean, you think about this, and you can, for those of you that are listening, you can go either way with this, in terms of like, well, it seems like brainwashing at the end of the day. But here's the thing: you want someone that believes the same thing running in the same direction with you. If you are in the military, you want to know that your brother or sister next to you are going to have your back no matter what. And so there's kind of this piece where, yeah, strip you down, build you back up. And that's kind of, one of those well-known things within any military culture. It's strip you
That's right.
down, build you back up.
Mhm.
But here's the thing that's really interesting to me is I think a lot of military members go in and strip down, build back up, and then when they leave, they never do the same thing. They don't strip down and then
Mhm.
build back
Oh,
up and
that's good. I
understand
like that.
who they
Yeah.
are. Because I think at the end of the day, like, I think one of the things that makes you so different, Don, based off of even, your story and what you've talked about, is you've always had a clear identity of who you are. You knew who you were in college and in high school. You knew who you were as a kid, the one who followed the rules and made sure that, well, within the written rules, right?
That's right.
but but then even in the military, you knew your identity in the military. You stuck with that, and then you get out and you start looking around. You say, okay, so here are my gifts, here are my talents. Where can I go that I can be me? And so you go. You didn't just go to any company. You went to Booz Allen, which like that's not an easy road to get in.
No.
And so you get in there. And so I think one of the most remarkable things about your story, and what many of you guys are finding even throughout this podcast, is that the people who are really successful in life, they know who they are.
Mhm.
They know who they are, and once they understand who they are, they start to understand that there's a purpose for their life. They were built in a very specific way for a very specific purpose, and they're going to go out and they're going to live that. Going back to kind of the tool analogy, if I'm a hammer, everything I
Mhm.
see is going to be a nail, and I'm just going to
Mhm.
go after it. I'm really great at drywall because I'm a hammer, right? I go out, really awesome. Like, you're going to hire me. But if all of a sudden I start marketing myself as the fine technician of, hey, I'm going to be able to come in and fix your circuit board panel. We know that's not going to end well, because I'm
No,
just going
not
to
not
get
with a hammer.
frustrated and start hammering the thing. This isn't working. It's
That's right.
it's if you want to fix it, kick it, and and that does not work in that situation. And I think that's what's really amazing about your story and who you are, is you truly understand who you are, and based off of that, you've been able to build your life around the concept of, this is who I am and this is who God calls me to be.
I made a decision in February of 1979 to follow Christ, which is a whole story into itself. Real quickly, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, I used to get up early on Sunday morning. My parents were sleeping till 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'd watch Oral Roberts or some other televangel, and I would see people come down, and he would place their hands on them, and he would heal them. And I was just like, what is this all about? How does this happen? Right. So I
As the
was, I was
logical one watching.
that's right. So I started dating another girl, not my wife. We dated in eighth grade and then in 11th grade, and she was a Christian, but we never really talked about it.
Hmm.
But when I started dating Karen, who's now my wife for 41 years, um, we sat and we talked and we talked and we talked, and her dad made it clear, not in a harsh way, not in a threatening way, but in a loving way. We want our daughter to marry a Christian young man. I wasn't a Christian young man. I'm not sure. Sometimes I displayed the right characteristics there. So it inspired me to be better so that I could have the prize of this woman who I was really liking. We got married in 82, but I accepted Christ in 79. And I didn't accept Christ as a tool to be able to marry her, but because I saw something there that I didn't have, that my parents didn't give me. And that was a love that went beyond family. It went just much deeper. Perfect example. I was in college before I accepted Christ. Let me say it that way. And I'm upstairs at church. My wife's downstairs teaching kids in Sunday school. I'm not a real little kid teacher. I love to read books, but I'm not really a teacher. And in that perspective, so I'm upstairs and I'm in the front row. I'm on the right hand side, and we're doing communion. And her father's a deacon in the church, so he's one of four up in the front row, getting the items. And he comes back, and sure enough, why does he have to be the guy who's going to serve me the item, right? The wine, and which was grape juice, right? And and I looked at him, and I knew that I was not a Christian. He had just said, "If you're not a Christian, just let it pass." I wasn't a Christian, so I let it pass. And he looked at me with a love in his eyes that sorry, I still see to this day, that just inspired me. And I said, there's something here that I have to know more about. And so I explored more and more, and just said, this is something I want. So then when I made the decision that I was going to be a Christ follower, I'm the kind of guy who I'm either all in or I'm all out. So if I'm going to say yes, I think about it. Before I joined the service in 1982, I thought very clearly, if called upon to go to war, would I go? And if I can't say yes, then I can't join. I can't be somebody who comes in, takes advantage of the education, takes advantage of the money, whatever, and then when called upon, I say no, conscientious objector or whatever, right? Um, so in 1990, when we invaded, well, actually Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we started amassing forces. we started going through all kinds of stuff. I was in Bitburg, Germany, and I knew at that point if my team got called upon, I was going to go, and I did. Twice in 1991 we went, and I probably spent most of 7 months in Turkey and northern Iraq that year.
Mm,
But it's the same thing when I accept Christ. I'm going to be all in. I'm going to follow him. And I'm
mm.
not saying that I've done the best job, but the heart is there. And I
Yeah.
keep trying to study more and read more and act more. But he guides my steps. When I was thinking back again to 2016, 17, when I'm thinking about who do I serve for my business, and God's in my head saying, military, veterans, frustrated, depressed, suicidal. I want you to help solve that problem, Don. I've trained you, I've prepped you. This is your time.
Mhm.
I had to follow.
I'm curious, what was it about that look from your father-in-law? Like when you go back and you see his eyes, what was it about that look like that grabbed your heart?
It was just an acceptance. It could have been almost like threatening. No, you have, because if go back to ego, right? He's the deacon in the church. Here's a guy who's dating his daughter. We've been dating for 2 years now, and he in front of the entire church, everybody. I never thought about it this way. Everybody is behind me, right? I'm in the front row, and everybody sees that I say no. What? How does that make him look? Right? He could have almost said, "Hey, dude, you got to take it, or I look kind of bad here, man." But he didn't, and
Just
he
take it.
didn't.
You can repent later,
That's
right?
right.
But
Right? It doesn't
yeah,
mean anything, but
it was
no.
the heart though.
But it was the heart, and it wasn't a look of, if you don't take it, you can't date my daughter. I didn't see that at all. It was just a look of all in due time. You're here in church. You're spending time with my daughter. I know you guys are talking about God and about Christ, and about what all that means and about the story. All in due time. God's working on you. And if it's to be, it's to be.
What I love about that so much is I I I almost see that this is the exact same look that you have when you're looking into the eyes of someone that is going through a transition. And I know that you said that,
It could be.
you're working with people in different aspects of transition, but even when you first started and talking with a service member who it gets to that point where they're going, I don't know if there is anything outside of service for me. There's nothing for me in civilian life. And then you look at them and you just, with those kind eyes, gracious eyes, it's as if you are looking at them and saying, it's fine in due time. In due time. And a lot of that is true. I'm curious in terms of the waiting period, because it's really easy to go through someone's story and you get all the highlights. You're like, he did this, he did that. This was really good. Look, boom, 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 boom. And here we are in our own lives and we're waiting.
Yep.
Like maybe you just had a good win and you're celebrating. Yeah, this was really good. And the next one is just around the corner and 5 years pass.
That's right.
And you're going, I'm not sure if this is where I'm supposed to be, but the seeds are in their germination period. They're growing under the surface, but you can't tell. We can't tell. If you were to go and dig it up, you ruin the process. Like it's not going to grow. You have to trust that it's going to grow. I'm curious in your life, what have been some of those planting moments where you planted something and you didn't even realize until much later that that was going to grow into something. It kind of reminds me of like the oak tree. There's that old saying of, when's the best time to you start, to plant an oak tree? It was, 50 years ago. When's the second best time? Today, right? But for you, I'm curious, what was one of those seeds that you planted early in your life that you didn't realize would actually germinate and come to fruition later on?
Ooh, I love tough questions. I really do. This is a good one. I think definitely joining the military was one. Um, I have a story that on day 3, I was this close to getting asked to leave officer training school. When I left Milwaukee, I was 6'5", 228 pounds. When I got to San Antonio, I was 6'4", 1 inch shorter. And after the first 2 days of just eating and filling out forms, I was 230. So when I weighed in, I was at my max. And the flight commander calls me in and says, "Don, you're at weight. I'm picking you up tomorrow morning at 7:25. We're going to march to the infirmary. If you are at or overweight, you're going home. Am I clear?" Think back to it, a few good men, right? I said, "Sir, can I ask a question?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "I was 6'5" in Milwaukee. My max is 236." And he goes, "Today you're 6'4". Your max is 230. Is there any questions?" No, sir. And I didn't eat or drink a thing that night. I ran 8 miles in the Texas heat that night in end of September. And ran another 12 minutes the next morning. Again, not eating or drinking a thing. I lost 8 pounds. I still can remember the look on my flight commander's face as the guy's moving the bar across the scale. And he hits 230 and it's down. He goes 228, 226, 224, 222, and it starts to come up. My flight commander's like, "I guess this guy wants to stay."
Which, by the way, for those of you that are listening, he's talking about the old school scales where you actually had a counterweight to figure out
That's right.
how much you actually weigh. Which is, it's
That's a good
funny
point.
because you say that, and it brings me back to my childhood of walking in to my parents into their spa room, and they had one of those scales, and I just remember looking at it on. I wasn't big enough to even get the scale to actually
To
level out
move.
to move, right?
Yeah.
But man, like that's so crazy. So that determination, that point of planting that seed 27 years later to get to where you are today. Well, not even to where you are today, but where you were at the end of your career. And if I'm not mistaken, you were actually only going in for 4 years. You weren't going to spend anything past 4 years in the military. What
Period. Dot.
changed?
Oh, the probably the biggest one was at the 6 month point. I went back to Madison and I met up with some of the people that I graduated college from. Mechanical engineer, electrical engineer. They were with big companies. They weren't doing anything like I was doing. I had more responsibility. I was taking on more projects. I was leading people. And they were kind of like just learning. And they almost looked at me kind of envious. And I was kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I got an opportunity to leave Marquette, Michigan, K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base, and go to Cheyenne. And part of what my wife and I decided before I joined the service was we want to go to Germany. We both had that feeling to go see the world. And I said, well, she asked me that night, she goes, "If we join, can we go to Germany?" I said, "We can't go to Germany if we don't join." Right? You're backwards around. So give us the opportunity. But we didn't get it at the 3.5 year point. We got Cheyenne, Wyoming. And that was a different place. No airfields, all ICBM missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear weapons, right? I think you're right. Those mindset pieces of just accepting that this is God's will. This is where you need to go and move forward. I had 3 incidents in officer training. The weight that I talked about, I got 4 pair of cotton fatigues, but everybody else got permanent press. So I spent an hour every night ironing, starching. I didn't take the first writing assignment seriously, so I got an extra hour of grammar every night. Go back through all of that. So I spent 3 hours doing those things before I could study my real material that everybody else was studying. So I had to be really dedicated. I spent most of the weekends in my room studying to get ahead so that I could do all those other things. I think that built in me, like you said, a resilience just to overcome. Now, it was interesting when I was a squadron commander, I was lieutenant colonel. I was at Great Falls, Montana, and I'm giving this gentleman an Article 15 for weight. He asked me, he says, "Sir, can I speak freely?" I said, sure. So I closed the paperwork, and first sergeant standing there, his supervisor standing there, and he's standing there, and he goes, sir, I'm having a hard time taking advice from a gentleman who is very thin. And you're telling me about how hard this is. I said, okay. I said, can I speak? He goes, sir. I said, let me tell you about my journey through the Air Force and how I almost got kicked out of OTS the third day, and how I have been right on the cusp. And I no longer even, I don't put butter on my sandwiches. I don't put mayonnaise on my sandwiches. I can't afford to eat roast beef. I have ham, lean ham, right? And half a piece of cheese. I don't eat cookies, in terms of like four or five. I have two a day. I said, I got to be very disciplined. And he goes, I didn't know that. I said, I don't talk about it a lot. I said, but I have struggled, which is why I don't have any problem talking to you about this. I need you to get on top of it like I got on top of it, because you have a lot of benefit to this Air Force if we can keep you. And
Mm.
guess what? Not just because of that, he had another problem. We got him on the right course. And when I left, we got him promoted. And the wing commander actually had to give him back his stripe. And I convinced the wing commander that was the right move for that gentleman,
Mm.
as he proved himself. So I think there was something in there about that story that helped inspire him a little bit.
That's so good.
So again, a seed come into fruition for him, right?
Yeah. Well, and not only, I think it's cool because I think that is kind of our plot in life. When we have people in our lives that come in and they show us where to plant the seed of our potential, and then they help to show us how to water it. The really good mentors show us how to water it, and then it's expected that at one point we would do the same thing for other people. And I love your story of it just keeps coming back to this idea of service, of serving other people. It's about relationships, it's how to connect with people. And so I'm curious, you've made this transition of not just people in the military space, veterans, but you're actually branching out. And I'm curious, what was the pull from your heart to go towards that? Because it's a very different marketing. And like it's similar in some aspects, but it's a completely different population. What was that draw for you to start serving in that capacity? And who are you? Like, what part of your character and who you are um pulls you in that direction to fulfill that need?
Another great question, because I hadn't even thought. I have thought about that, but I haven't thought about it in the way you just instilled in me. Thinking back to COVID, thinking back to as we came out of COVID, how many businesses quickly wanted to put people back in the office, how individuals who had worked in the office who are now working remotely didn't want to go back to work. So I think it was at one point it was 4 million people were changing jobs every month, right? And because they had gone through certain things, there was a lot of mental health issues. They were at home trying to do their job. Their kids were at home, so they're trying to help the kids learn, trying to work with the teachers. Teachers were in the classroom. Some teachers had people on computers in the classroom being working remote, and some people sitting in the seats, and they were struggling, right? So there's so many mental health issues going on that come out of that. And I've heard this figure that 70% of people who left that job, remember the 4 million people a month for X number of months, 70% of them regret leaving because they didn't find what
Mm,
they were looking for. So the question is, what are you looking for? Right? Do you know? Right? A lot of times the military, they got out of the high school and they just joined the service. They got out of college and just joined the service. It either was what they were dreamed about or it was an opportunity. Me, it was my only choice, really, because I could have got a job, but I wasn't finding them. But it was either grad school, job, or Air Force. So I took Air Force. But too many people, I think, take a job that's it's not in their passion, like you talked about, and they haven't figured out what their passion is. In my program, I'm developing a digital course. The first one is mindset. If you don't know who you are, it's tough for you to define what you want. So I do mindset, and then I do what next focus, then networking, and then selling your value. Most people go to selling your value. They start writing their resume and their LinkedIn profile, and then they struggle with what do I put in it? Well, the question I ask is, so what do you want to be? Well, I don't know. Well, then it's pretty hard. It's kind of like, I just thought about it. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland with the Cheshire Cat. She goes down, into the Wonderland, and it comes to the fork in the road, and there's a Cheshire Cat in the tree, and Alice says, "Which road do I take?" And he says, "Depends where you want to go." And she says, "Well, I don't rightly know." So the cat says, "Well, then either path will get you there."
Mm.
And I think that's such a great analogy because so many people don't know what they want to do, and therefore they're taking any path. But if you're going to write the resume, to figure out what you put in the resume, you got to know what you want to do. And to do that, you got to figure out who you are, right? We go through the DISC personality assessment with Maxwell, and you understand your style, what your behavior, your communication style, maybe your sales style, all relates together. So once you start to understand yourself by going through that and others, now you start to figure out what kind of jobs you're probably more inclined to do. I'm a SC, but they're almost identical. I could be a CS. So very analytical, very detailed, very process oriented, but very collaborative, very teamwork, resist conflict. Engineer fit me perfectly. And just trying to find out what things fit other people. Not that they have to follow that, but it gives them a start, an inclination, a place to begin to start exploring. And that's the networking piece, right? You
Mm.
go out and you start networking with people. Well, what are you doing as an engineer? How's your day look like? What are the challenges you faced? What's the organization? What are the expectations? How much travel do I do? All those different questions to see, boy, I think that's what I want to do. And then you come back and now you can write your resume because now you see a position out there. Hey, this fits my personality. It uses my skills. Here's my experience. Now I can write a resume that gets there, and then you can use those stories in your interview. So I think there's a clear process. Um, so it's helping, but it goes back to. So I just talked about my where I'm going with a digital course, but it's all about how do I help those individuals that are struggling to find that right job, even as civilians, because they're going through that same depression and mental health issues that the military are.
So good. Everything that you're saying is it's just hitting right on. And Don, I truly want to thank you for being on. Before we end here, I do have one more question for you. But for those of you that are listening in right now, I want to encourage you all to go and check out what Don is doing. You can go follow him, go find him at achievenewheights.com. You can go find him on LinkedIn. He's on pretty much everything for social media. So go find Don. You can find him in the show notes. I'll put all the links in there so you guys can check him out. But not only just for the transitions for veterans, but also transitions in terms of just people every day trying to figure out what it is that they want. And I know that this program that he's talking about is going to serve you so well. Don, when it comes to having the right mindset, when it comes to doing the thing that is right for you, I think a lot of the times right now we don't have the right people in our inner circle. We surround
Mm.
ourselves very unintentionally with people. Maybe we've been with the same people for our entire lives and we think, "Oh, well, like it'll be okay. We've been friends since we were in the 8th grade." And at the end of the day, I think a lot of what holds people back is they never question the influences that are in their life. They don't question the mentors. They don't question their friends. It's really easy to surround yourself. From a guy's perspective, it's easy to surround yourself with the guys that want to go out and have a beer and and just kind of party down. And you don't think about that until the moment where your life is crashing down around you and you can't figure out why you're about to get a divorce and all the guys that you're friends with are about to get divorces, right? Like there's something to this idea of making sure that you have a strong community around you. And I know that you believe community is one of the key factors when it comes to success because it takes more than one person for
For
anyone
sure.
to have success. How has community played a role in developing who you are today? What are those key attributes of who you are that maybe wouldn't be there today if you didn't have the right people surrounding you, lifting you up, encouraging you, hitting you over the head when you do something stupid? We know those guys, those gals too. But how has community played a huge role in the development of who you are and what you do today?
Another great question. I want to say it's probably going to be in keeping me humble. to go ask somebody for advice should mean that you're ready to listen. Doesn't always mean that way. I found out. Some people want advice and they definitely don't want to take it. It's like, okay, take it
They
for
want
what
the
it's worth then.
perception that they're looking for
That's
advice.
right. So if I'm going to go ask somebody, then I should be truly interested in not only their advice, but in improving. And sometimes I need to go ask some advice and say, something's not working. Can you give me any insight into how I'm coming across or how people perceive me that would help me? I think back to the different mentors I've had. Haven't always been. It's not like the wing commander, the group commander, even the squadron commander. In some places, it was a deputy squadron commander, deputy base civil engineer, or it was a gentleman who became a deputy, but at the time he was chief of programming, so he was three below the squadron, the deputy base civil engineer. But it was people who were my supervisors or peers, and I just looked up to them. They
Mm.
carried themselves in the right way. They communicated in the right way. So I just thought of a story that just typifies this individual. Ted Caro was his name. He was my first supervisor in the Air Force, civilian, GS-13 at the time. And squadron commander was only like 5'2". I'm 6'5". So the first time I'm sitting in my desk, and it was a small desk and a chair, and I couldn't even get my knees underneath the desk. That's all they had. And the squadron commander comes in. All of a sudden, they announced he was in the room. So I stood up. Well, he was walking over to me, and there's just a huge disparity. And he starts walking away to the other side of the room, talking to me to kind of lessen that feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I felt uncomfortable. I could tell he felt uncomfortable. About 3 or 4 weeks later, all of a sudden the squadron commander came in, and he came in quietly. I guess he told people not to call the room to attention. Next thing I know, he puts his hand on my shoulder, and I turned around and said, "Hi, sir," and I sat at attention. We are almost eye to eye, right? And he stayed right there, and we talked for about 3 or 4 minutes. He goes, "Thank you very much. Carry on. I'll be back." And so carry on means don't call the room to attention. When he leaves, he just left. And my boss Ted walked over, and he goes, "I just have to ask a question, Don. Weren't you supposed to stand up when you noticed it was the squadron commander?" I said, "Yes." I said, "That was the weirdest thing because look what happened 3 weeks ago, and look how he felt today." And now I sat at attention. I tried to give him his respect, but I also tried to respect the height difference, and he felt very comfortable. And but I always appreciated Ted coming over and asking that question because he helped me think about what just happened, and he gave me some feedback. So I've always been open to people giving me that feedback because that helps me both in my performance, but also helps me later on. We had a
Mm.
situation one time at Kirtland Air Force Base. Squadron commander's up on stage, and they're doing a medal presentation ceremony. And I could see in his eyes something wasn't right. But being he was a group commander, I'm a squadron commander. So I'm sitting kind of in the front row of the theater. So there's a lot of people behind me. Problem with being a commander in the senior positions, everybody's behind you, right? You don't know what's going on. And I had lunch with him the next day. I said, "So what was going on yesterday? You just looked, your eyes were kind of, something was going on behind me." And he goes, "Yeah, we're all standing at attention, recognizing these people getting, achievement medals, commendation medals, meritorious service medals. And there's this group of civilians that are sitting and talking. And I kick myself for not stopping the ceremony, asking them to stand up." 2 years later, I'm at Malmstrom, Great Falls, Montana. Exact same thing happens. I'm the squadron commander, and there's these civilians sitting and talking and during the ceremony. And I paused the ceremony. I walked over to the microphone. And I said, "Everybody keep focusing on me. But you people that are in the back of the room that aren't standing, I would ask you to stand up to give this ceremony its proper due. If you were here on stage, we certainly would want everybody to stand and recognize you and your achievement. So please, Dad, do that for these people." And I turned it over and I just went back and we just did the ceremony. They did stand up. I got a complaint through the union the next day, and I just explained it, and nothing ever became of it.
Mm.
There was a lot of people grumbling, but there was a lot of people in the squadron that followed me closer because I had the gumption to call them out. I got so
Mm.
many comments right after that. Thank you for doing that. That always bothers me. I appreciate it. You kept, so many great things. So even though he didn't plan on mentoring me that day, the group commander, he did mentor me for what I was going to see in the future. Again, more seeds being planted. If you're paying attention to the seeds that are happening around you, you will be able to use them as
Mm.
full grown plants later on. So that was a great analogy you had there.
Well, I love that too because so many people don't look at every single opportunity as an opportunity to learn. And I think we all have to come to that place where we look at the environment that we're in and we have to ask ourselves, are we learning from this environment? Whether it's a negative experience or whether it's a positive experience, we have to come to that conclusion of, does this serve me? Does this get me closer to where I'm being called to go? Are my gifts and my talents being used appropriately? And that comes into really a question of, are you in the space where you can grow into the person you were created to be? And some of us, we don't have all the leisure to be able to move from one environment to another. You have to make small accommodations and small changes as you go. But I will say, one of the biggest things that you can do, if you're listening right now, one of the biggest things you can do is start to question the people that are around you and ask you, do they bring out the best in you? Do they call to attention the things that you're doing and say, hey, it's not even a, are they saying directly to you, hey, you should stop doing that? Or is there a conviction in your heart where you see someone else doing something, you go, man, I want to be more like that. I want to be more like that dad. I want to be more like that grandparent that is listening to their kids. And that forces you in your heart to go, I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to turn off the TV. I'm going to stop reading my book. And it causes you to turn. It causes you, I love the word repent, to do a 360 or to do a 180 and to run in the other direction. And I hope that you're listening right now and you hear this and you go, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed. I want to turn and I want to go towards a place, towards an environment that is going to grow me, that's going to make me better.
To do that, you have to kind of know where you want to go,
Hmm.
right? I want to be a better husband. What does it take me to do that? I want to be a better father. What does it take me to? What I want to be a better Christian man. What does it take me to do that? And when you know that, then I think that intuition inside you will tell you that's not going to help you get there. This will. Or maybe somebody will tell you, said, looks like you want to be this, but you're moving in an opposite direction.
I have absolutely loved your time so much, Don. I really appreciate you for jumping on, for your service to our country, to all the great lessons that you've bestowed on all of us as we've gotten to listen to your stories, listen to who you've become over the years, being more than before. All of you that are listening, I hope that you go and you share this with a friend, especially someone who is in transition, who's looking for help to transition out of where they are and to be running after a dream, running after a goal, understanding who they are and fulfilling a position in their life that makes them feel fulfilled. So remember, until next time, be more, see more, and experience more than before.